here today with Raul Abel, and we're interviewing him. The date is May 15th, 2003, and we are at his place of living at 720 North Jeffers Avenue. His birth date is December 12th, 1929, and we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, Mr. Abel, were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted.
Where were you living?
We lived in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Were you still living with your parents? Were you married at the time?
I was married and had a child at that point.
Okay. So obviously you didn't have a choice to join. How did you feel when you were drafted?
Very disappointed.
So had you made like discrete future plans?
Well, before the year before that, I had thought I was going to go into the ministry, and I didn't have enough money to go into the ministry at that time, and so I really had to drop out and work a year. And so this was really not even a year. It was only about 6 months later that I got drafted. As long as I was studying to be a minister, I had what was then called a 4D draft classification, which exempted me from the draft. As I said, I didn't have enough money, so I had to drop out, and so I wasn't in the school anymore, so I lost that classification, and so they did draft me from that. And yes, I had some plans, but and you don't want to leave your wife and your young child, so it was a very, very difficult decision for me just to go right on into it. I gave some very serious consideration to what they called then a conscientious objector, which meant that I had conscientious objections to serving in the military. So I probably would have still had to serve in some capacity in a peace corps type of thing. But as I analyzed my beliefs and analyzed what I could interpret from the Bible, I did have an obligation to serve the country. Didn't want to, hated it, but that's what had to be done, so I did it.
Right, okay. You said you were in the Army?
Yes.
Why did you pick that branch of service?
I
You
didn't pick it. I was
didn't pick
drafted into the Army.
Oh, okay. All right. Do you recall your first days in the service?
The first full day I was in the service was my birthday, and it was not a very good birthday present. Yes, the day that I was drafted was the 11th of December, and we went down to the center of Indianapolis. They put us on a bus, and we were bussed over to Fort Leonard in Missouri, and so we started our processing there. So we were given a place to go to, barracks where we were supposed to go in our beds. And we started our processing at that point, getting our uniforms and doing some. We didn't get all the uniforms that first day, but we got some of the stuff that we were supposed to have. Seems to me like the next day I was on KP.
What is KP?
That's called, KP is Kitchen Police. It means you go and you peel the potatoes and serve and do things like that. And have the garbage off the plates and then wash up and mop the floors of the mess hall and all that.
Tell me about your boot camp experiences.
Okay, well they didn't call it boot camp, it was called basic training. And we took basic training there in Fort Leonard Wood. It was in December, as I said, and it happened to be a very, very cold winter that winter. And so we did a lot of marching, and I really didn't think I'd get drafted because I had a bad knee, and I had some other problems, and I didn't think I'd actually pass the physical, but I did. Well, my knee gave out of me as we were running the obstacle course, and it didn't lock on me, so I eventually, the pain subsided, and I was able to join everybody, but I went on light duty for that, and I spent a good deal of time on light duty. It was a thing that they didn't like because I had already been appointed to be a squad leader for our squad, and they didn't like light duty squad leaders. So it meant I rode to some of the places rather than having to march them. But the basic training was told. I remember when we were firing for record, and that's where the marksman's medal came from. Um, we, of course, you lay on the ground. Well, as a squad leader, I was permanent coach, and so I laid on the ground for about 2 hours, and I got up and I was just as cold as I could be, because it really did get cold. So, basic training it was not a blast.
Yeah.
It was just something you had to endure, and well, they used to do a lot of hazing of the recruits, and the Army was beginning to change. They don't do anything like that anymore, I don't think. But there was still some of that hazing that went on. Usually Saturday afternoons, we had free time. We weren't released to go anywhere, but we had free time. And so we were playing soldier Saturday morning and got released after eating lunch. And so I decided it was time to clean up. I didn't do it. I felt dirty, I guess. So I started taking a shower, and the acting, I forget what his title was. He was one of the sergeants. And he was responsible for us. Blew the whistle for everybody to fall out. Well, here I am in the shower.
Oh, no.
And so I hardly get dressed, and I'm late getting in. And so since I was late, they made me do some push-ups. So all they did was just muster us, and then they released us again. Well, I'm going to finish my shower. So I got back to the shower, and sure enough, they called us out again. It happened 3 times. So I got to do push-ups that day.
Longest shower ever. Do you remember any of your instructors? Anything like that?
I can see their faces in my mind, but I can't tell you their names. So.
Well, that's fine. Do you remember what they were like?
Our permanent cadre they were tough, but they were nice. This temporary guy was just a little bit harassing, but they were nice,
That's good.
And as part of your training is that, the cadre themselves would not be the ones that actually did the training. They were ones that just mustered you, put you back and forth, made sure you went to bed, cleaned up, and everything else. You'd go out to the sites, and there would be officers in charge, and NCOs that would be there, and they would be in charge of actual training, whether it be the nomenclature of an M1 rifle and how to tear it apart, or using machine gun or whatever it was. So you'd go to these various places for that kind of training.
Do you remember, you said it was not a very pleasant experience. How did you get through all of that?
One day at a time.
You said you served in the Korean War, correct?
Yeah, it was the tail end of the Korean War when I went in. Actually, if I hadn't been studying for the ministry, I would have been drafted early in the Korean War. It was really, the fighting had really ended by the time I was drafted, but the war was still officially on, and they did not sign peace treaties until much well into my term as a soldier.
Okay. Do you remember arriving where you were and what it was like and what it looked like?
There for the basic training?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You're just overwhelmed with it. You're still so unhappy about having to leave your family. At least I was. I don't know what everybody was that way, but I was so unhappy having to leave my family. Everything was bad.
Yeah. After your basic training, do you remember where exactly you went and what you did?
Yes, we went for a second 8 weeks training, and that was where I went to Belvoir, Fort Belvoir, Virginia. There, I was to be an engineer supply specialist, and I was trained for that in the next section. So, yeah, that was just right outside of Washington, D.C. It was a very nice place to be. We learned a lot about the supply details of supplying an army, and after we finished that, we actually could be a supply sergeant in a company, or we could work at a depot level. And there were several different positions we could have.
You said that you were a supply specialist. What exactly was your job or assignment that you performed?
As I said, it could have been many things. So my first assignment after that was back at Fort Belvoir, and I worked for a training aid sub-center is what they called it. What we did was manufacture the mock-ups that were used in the training. So there'd be mock-ups, wooden mock-ups of the various guns and rifles. I shouldn't call them guns, that was a no-no. But rifles and mock-ups of the machine guns, mock-ups of just anything that you would be using in the service, so that they could be used out in the fields where they were training the soldiers. And so we made those. My job then was to keep track of the supplies as we used them, make sure we always had a good supply of things, and maintain that supply. And because I was the one that would issue all the supplies and keep the records and that sort of thing. But that's what I did while I was there.
Okay. Did you happen to see any combat at all?
No, I never did. Of course, you go through training, but it's not real combat.
So there probably weren't very many casualties in your unit then, correct?
No, of course, this was just the first year that we talked about so far. The second year I was in Japan, and that's when I was overseas.
Wow, I didn't know about that. Tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences.
As a soldier,
As anything. It can...
oh, um, I guess my job I had two jobs in Japan. One was both was at Yokohama Engineer Depot, and when I was first assigned there, I was put in what they call research or something. I forget what we called it at this point. Actually, the depot was pretty much manned by Japanese nationals. There were soldiers there. We oversaw what the Japanese were doing. They had contractors that would repair the big earth movers and graders and the Caterpillar tractors and all those sort of things. And of course, during the war, anything that was damaged would have been shipped back to us from Korea to Japan and would have been repaired. Well, there were still pieces of equipment that had to be repaired while I was there. So, and you know, they were soldiers still over in Korea too at that point, ready to fight as soon as they needed to. So we had a lot of spare parts that had to be on file all the time. And as the contractors would do the repair work, if there was something where they lost the parts or whether they damaged something, they had to make a report to the Army as to why it happened. And if the Army felt that they were liable for it, then they would be charged for it. And my first assignment was to review their reports and to actually make a recommendation whether they should pay for the part or not. So I did that for a few months, and then I was transferred to another section where there was just me and a Department of Army civilian in that section, and we oversaw all the record keeping and the purchasing, ordering, so to speak, of all the parts that were there in the depot. And so the two of us actually were the only ones in that section. There was a large cadre of Japanese people. I hesitate now to say how many people there were. There were 200 or 300 people in that group that were keeping the records and all that. And we would, my job would be to check out a part, make sure we did have it, because it was something that we knew when the schedule was coming out. So I would go out and talk to the girls that were keeping the record books and make sure that we did have them. And it's interesting because my Japanese by that time was very, very poor. I had a guidebook, but that didn't tell me much. So some of the Japanese that were closer to me were kind of gave me some phrases I could use, and so I could go out with my paper and say to the girl, "Please show me this," in Japanese, and so that we took care of it that way. There's a lot of good things about being in Japan. I hated every second of being in the Army, don't get me wrong, but there were a lot of good things about being in Japan. And getting to know the Japanese people was part of it. I was extremely disappointed that I was being sent to Japan. I didn't know what I would do in Korea. I certainly didn't want to be there if I didn't have to be. Sure, I would have pulled the trigger, I'm sure, if I'd been in combat, but I didn't want to do that. But, we really wanted to go to Europe after I got out of the supply school. Uh, my ancestors are all from Europe, and I thought that'd be a good time for me to kind of check things out over there, but, yeah, that wasn't to be. That was probably a good thing I got sent to Japan for my sake. The reason I say that, is that I grew up as a teenager during the Second World War. I vividly remember what I was doing on December the 7th, 1941. And so I know, those dirty, sneaky, can't be trusted Japs is what I had in my mind about the Japanese people. And so this was really not where I wanted to be. People that my Christianity told me to love, but I was certainly having a lot of hate in that love. And so being sent there, it got me to the point where I opened my eyes, and I began to see that the Japanese people, just like you and I are, they're wanting to do what's right. They want to take care of their family, do the best they can, raise their children, and so that the children have a better life than they had. And that's exactly what I felt I wanted for myself. And so it was a really good experience for me, just for that sake, if not for anything else.
Why exactly were you sent to Japan?
I never could figure that out.
They just said, hey, you're going to Japan?
My number was up, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Well, as long as you still had a little over a year to serve, you still could be sent overseas. And so I assumed that when the orders came to transfer some people from Fort Leonard Wood to overseas assignments, that I was in the category. And so my number came up as a person that was potential for that. There's nothing personal about any of those things, and I certainly didn't volunteer to go there. But that's how it happened, I guess.
Okay. Did you make any Japanese friends? You said you got to know the
I
Japanese
made
people.
quite a number of Japanese friends. The people that worked with me, one of them was an ex-lieutenant colonel in the Japanese Air Force. We got to be fairly decent friends, although it was a business relationship with him. But with my background of anticipating going into the ministry, I became very close friends with the chaplain's assistant. And at the Yokohama Engineer Depot, the chaplain's assistant traditionally taught, quote, English, quote, lessons to the Japanese nationals who wanted to learn, quote, English. It's actually a Bible study class. And so I started, the people at that depot in the past have collected money and built a church, a Christian church, just outside the depot, and for the Japanese people. So we went to this Christian church. I would go with the chaplain's assistant, and we would just teach the Bible. And so I got to be very close friends to those people, and it was good. They're some of the best Christians I've ever met. Really, but there were some who were still exploring Christianity, and they were very, very curious about it. And it was kind of a dangerous thing for them too, at least in terms of family relationships, because if they became Christians, they probably would be ostracized by their families. But none of them ever became Christian while I was there, but I understand quite a few of them did after I left, and so I really think I did some missionary work while I was there too. As a result of that, I was asked by several of them to start another class, and so I actually was teaching 2 classes. And as a result of all that and the relationship that I had with the Japanese nationals, I don't think it's not anything that shows on my records, but there was the commander of the depot gave me a special citation for building better relationships with the Japanese. And so I've always cherished that. Unfortunately, I haven't kept my contacts with them, but I did for a while. But when the letters got farther apart,
Yeah.
eventually we did keep contact.
speaking of medals and citations, you said you were rewarded some. How did you get them, and what were they?
Well, you get conduct medal, you get three. Well, technically, you have to serve 4 years to get the conduct medal. I only served just a little under two, but the part of, part of the things that I was talking about that led toward that, and I actually did get that. The other was just because you're there. So if you served over that series, you got the National Defense Medal.
Okay. Okay. How did you stay in touch with your family?
Letters, 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 pictures, pictures, pictures.
You wrote a lot then.
A lot.
Kind of a funny question. What was the food like that you ate?
Well, the food in the service was pretty decent food. It's funny you ask. I grew up in a small town. Before I moved to Indianapolis, I grew up in a small town. We had a chicken yard, and so we had chicken frequently, and it was a good meal as far as I was concerned. While I was in the service in Japan, the cook I soon thought he was doing us favors. He had chickens for us every Sunday, but he fried them in such greasy stuff that it was terrible. And I finally got to the point I couldn't stand even the thought of chicken. And you ask my friends today, I don't like chicken. You serve it to me, if it's baked, I'll eat it and enjoy it. But the idea of chicken turns me off. But basically the food was good. Even I can remember, I've always been one that eats most anything, but I remember even the basic training when we'd have, what I guess they would call sea rations, those cans of sausage that was packed with grease. A lot of guys just wouldn't eat it. I'd take theirs and eat theirs too.
Did you ever run out of, or not run out, but like become short of one certain item since you were a supply clerk or whatever?
Not that I ever remember.
Okay. I'm sure that you felt pressure or stress at any time.
You're stressed being a soldier. I assume it's still that way, although I don't think there's as much harassing now as there even was when I was there. But the stress being away from the family, stress doing things. I enjoyed what I did in Japan. I'm there in Fort Leonard Wood. I enjoyed doing that. It was an okay job. And in fact, both of them were kind of like an 8 to 5 job. We had to play like we were soldiers on Saturday, but that was stressful. But other than that, I guess not too much stress.
What did you do on Saturday that you had to play like a soldier? I'm interested.
Well, especially Japan, we had to be able to defend the depot if that became necessary. Now, the actual security of the depot was contracted to a Japanese contractor, and all of the guards were Japanese. So the security was absolutely there. But we were supposed to be able to handle a riot or something like that. And so on Saturday mornings we would train to be able to handle the riot. Most of us were very poor in that regard. I recall we had an exercise where the thing was set up so that over here is where the rioters were. So we were supposed to go over there and quell this riot. If I'd have been on the other side, I wouldn't have moved. So I guess it was a couple of weeks later they asked the Japanese guard force to put on a demonstration of how to do what we were supposed to know how to do. I'll tell you what, I would have moved for that. They were good, but we were lousy. And you have to understand that it was still kind of a dangerous place in Japan. This was 10 years after Lee J. Day. Communists were still strong, still trying to take over the country. May Day, of course, is a traditional holiday or thing for communists. And all American soldiers were confined to posts on May Day. And so there was still some dangers, not big dangers, but still something could have happened. And so Yeah, it was appropriate that we be trained to handle rats, because well, it could have been.
True. You said that was May Day that. Okay, just making sure. Was there something special that you did for good luck, like, and anything that you did?
Not particularly.
Okay. How did people entertain themselves on free time that you had?
Well, I read books. Read books. Because some of my free time I used to teach the Bible school, Bible classes, English classes, if I say quote English unquote. And I also taught Sunday school to officers' children, the families who were there. Well, a part of my time was taken up with that. But there, there would be, we had a, we actually, our barracks was a former Japanese hospital. And outside the barracks, the Japanese had built a absolutely gorgeous Japanese garden. And so a lot of our spare time, I'd just go sit in the garden. It was so beautiful. In fact, I have a couple, three pictures of Mount Malone in the other room that I took. My very first 35 millimeter camera I bought in Japan and took this picture. The very first picture, probably one of the best pictures I've ever taken.
Isn't that ironic? Do you remember like any entertainers or speakers that were?
Well, we were there at the Indiana Singing Hoosiers came over and sang for us.
Really?
So I remember that.
That's cool. What did you do when on leave?
One of the, I didn't take too many leaves over there. When I was in the United States, I took a leave, and my wife and our child, we went up to Niagara Falls and went to visit her aunt who lived out in Connecticut and came back. That's when I came back and found I was on all the overseas orders after that. But in Japan, I really didn't take a whole lot of time off. Some Sunday afternoons, I would join my Japanese friends, and we'd go take the train to a park someplace in a national park and have a picnic, and we did a lot of that. So, but the only leave I took was with one of my best buddies in the service, and we went up to Nikko, up in the mountains. And Nikko's kind of a holy city for the Shinto religion, and so we went up there and went through all of the shrines that they had up there. And there was a beautiful lake that we went. We went. It was just a good place to go as a tourist. So we spent the time up there. It was a long weekend. It was not all it was, but
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual event?
I have to laugh at it. What happened to me there in basic training in the showers?
That's-
I laugh at that now.
That's
I
kind
didn't know it then.
Yeah.
But the opportunities that were there, maybe not humorous, but certainly memorial. When I was at Fort Belvoir, we had the opportunity to go in and visit a lot of places in Washington, D.C. And so I really got to spend some time in Washington and got to appreciate the town and the things that go on there. When I was in Japan, of course, getting to go with the Japanese friends was certainly an honor, really. One other weekend, the USO set up a tour to go over to Mount Fujiyama, and so that we all would climb Mount Fuji. And so I went with them, and so I got to climb Mount Fuji as a part of that, and that was pretty memorable. But it was not working. That's not working as a soldier. I don't know that there was anything I did.
Yeah. What were some of the pranks that you or others would pull on other soldiers, friends? Were there any pranks? Stealing of soap, shampoo.
No, I don't recall anything like that. The only prank that I would recall is this best buddy I mentioned had been an English professor at the University of Illinois. I don't know if he was a professor, but he was an instructor of English at the University of Illinois before he was drafted. And so while he was assigned there at the Yokohama Engineer Depot, he got permission for on Saturday to go into the uh, American University in Tokyo to teach English as a part of it at that level to the Japanese students. And as he would go into town from where we were, he had to ride the train to get there. And so there was this one Japanese boy, I guess he was a student that was going on, it wasn't a student at the American University, but he was a student in Tokyo. And so he recognized that this was an American, and he started exercising his English with him and practicing his English, and they got to be somewhat good friends. And so he invited my friend Lee and his friends to come to his uncle's. In this fish restaurant, everything was served to us. We were sitting around little hibachi or whatever you call it, and they were cooking the fish and deep fried, that kind of thing. Well, it seemed like they never could figure out the English words for the fish that we were eating, or the seafood that we were eating, until after we'd eaten it. So that was kind of a prank, I think. So I ate several things I probably wouldn't have eaten otherwise.
So they kind of pulled a prank on you.
Yeah.
That's funny. Did you keep any personal diaries of your accounts?
My diary was basically my letters to my wife,
That's interesting.
and I still have them.
You do? That's keep them all. That's great. Do you recall the day that your service ended? Like how you felt?
Oh, yes.
Very happy.
Very, very happy. As I said, I hated every second of it in the service. Yes, it was at Fort Sheridan, Illinois, just north of Chicago. And my wife and my child and I guess my in-laws brought her up there. And I know after that it was processed, but it was interesting to see my wife for the first time. It's been well over 11 months since I've seen her. And to see her and our daughter, what tickled me was the daughter held back to let my wife come read me first. So it was quite a reunion.
When you first saw your daughter, you probably noticed that she'd grown quite a bit. Was
Oh,
that
she had.
was that surprising to you?
Well, I did see pictures of her all along.
Okay. Did you go back to work, or I'm assuming that you're finished with school?
I had graduated from college before that, when I went into the service, yes. Yes, I had been corresponding with the company. I'd worked I worked full-time putting myself through school, and while I went to school full-time. And so I'd worked as an hourly employee at this company. And so I'd been corresponding with them. When I came out, I was not going to go into the ministry, but I wanted to go back to work. And my objective was to eventually get into personnel work. And so they invited me to come back to work and go through the management training program. And so, yes, I did go back to work.
You said that you made close friendships while in the service. About how long did you keep in touch with them?
I would say a year and a half, 2 years.
That's a long time. Did you join a veterans organization or anything like that?
I belonged to the American Legion here in Van Buren for a couple of years, but that's all, and I never was active. I joined it so I could eat from their restaurant.
What did you say that you went on to do as a career?
As I said, I wanted to go into personnel work, and so it's now thought of as human resource, but that was my career then.
Okay. Did your experience in the military influence your thinking about war in the future or military in general?
Yes, I suppose it gave me more of an open mind toward it. I recognize that war, although something to be abhorred, is unfortunately sometimes necessary. And certainly, where would we be if we had not joined in the Second World War? Where would we be if we hadn't joined in the First World War? Korea was hardly our war, but yet it was our war. And so, yes, and it bugged me, all the people that were so against the war in Vietnam. It really bothered me. You notice there's a flag outside my pretty emotional about my patriotism.
That's very good. So I'm guessing that your service and experiences in the service affected your life then.
Oh, yeah. As I say, I hated every second of it, but the second I was out, I was glad I'd had the experience.
Is there anything that you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
Oh, I don't know, there's so much that, I don't know that I remember everything in this service, but it was a good experience. I really, as I said before, I'm really happy that it was Japan, and even though I was unhappy to be away from my family, I was happy that my experience, if I had to be away from it, was in Japan. It really made me a better person. And I think the discipline of the service also helped me be a better person. I actually have come to the point where I would be in favor of a universal conscription law where everybody would have to serve a couple of years, even yourself. I do believe that would help our society. There's such we've gone so far away from the disciplines of the past. Some of it maybe was too rigid, and some of it we needed to break away from. But I think that any person who is going to be successful in life has to have a lot of self-discipline. And that helped me in the service, to be in the service, to learn some of this. Not that I didn't have discipline, but it could help me have more. It gave me, my service experience gave me GI benefits, and so I did go back to school afterwards, went back at night school, and I was going to get my master's, my MBA, but my first degree, obviously, was in religion, and it was a Bachelor of Arts. Um, so I went back and went to GI Bill and was able to get a Bachelor of Science in Business. They wanted me to have 27 hours of preparatory courses before they would let me get into the master's program. And by the time I had 27 hours, I was so burned out, I knew I was not going to be able to survive. So I took another 3 hours and got the Bachelor of Science degree. So there's a lot of good things that have happened in my life because of being in the service. The horrible things, horrible. I hated to be out.
Well, thank you for sharing this with me.